Welcome to all of you. I'm thrilled to see some old friends joining us from Tokyo, from Berlin, from Ireland, from all over the world and all over the United States, which makes me very happy. I'm Valerie Fletcher. I'm the executive director of the Institute for Human-Centered Design. And today I am sharing an experience I had last year through the good wisdom of one of my board members, Dr. Erin Friedlander, who was a friend of Stuart Nielsen and was deeply excited about what Stuart was doing, about Stuart as a person. And he was featured in a conference last fall at Yale, at Yale British Museum. And I had the opportunity to both see his work and to meet him. And I am so happy to be able to share that experience with you today. He shows you a world that most of us don't know, using the simplest tools of camera and smartphones. We will have open captioning for this. Stuart will be describing each of the images for those joining us who may not be able to see his images. And we will be taking questions at the end. We welcome you to start putting those questions in whenever you like. And I will be catching those and giving them to Stuart at the end. But I think we can have a very rich dialogue. We will also be editing the captions from today and saving this as an archived presentation available to you off our website in 2 weeks. And Stuart and I talked a little bit before, talked about what is he going to do next. So we're really thrilled about how Stuart will take what he is learning and continue to explore and to share. So Dr. Nielsen, the floor is yours.
Hello, I'm glad to be here. I'm in Cork City in Ireland, so different time zone. It's 5 o'clock here, and it's cold. We've got a May that's like winter. So I'll start my slideshow here. Sharing the whole desktop. And starting my slides. Right, so hopefully you can see that. And I'll hide this floating. Oh, I should have hidden the other thing first, shouldn't I? Because you're seeing myself and Valerie. Hide the video panel. Sorry about this. This is new to me. So we learned something new doing this. This is Cork City. I'm wearing a camera on a bicycle helmet. And this is something that wouldn't have been possible maybe 10 years ago. But now we've got delivery riders. With delivery riders and cyclists, a lot of them wear cameras on their helmets for safety to create evidence if they're involved in accidents and so on. So you can walk around with a cycling helmet as long as you look like you might have been on a bicycle, and nobody pays any attention. I've got a short video clip to show you that nobody even looks at the camera whilst I'm walking around. You might have a comment here about the image on the left-hand side that I'm looking at. This is a signboard. It was erected this year. And it's a very odd choice of colors with, on the very left top panel, I'm 6 foot tall. I'm 5'11", nearly 6 foot. So with the helmet, I'm a little bit over 6 foot. And the historical bit is so high up off the ground in bright white on a grey background in Irish, and then less prominently in English. And this is for visitors to our city. And then the captions to this, the map are down at about 3 feet off the ground, where that might be great for a child or somebody in a buggy or a wheelchair, but it's not great for most adults, and it could be replicated at a greater height. And the map is actually quite hard to comprehend. It's quite hard to see against this dark background. Uh, the language that I use, when I'm talking about space and place, I'm thinking about space as something objective with length and volume and geometry and geography that you can design, you can put affordances into, there are opportunities there. And place is my subjective experience of being in that space. And it's very dependent on my senses, my memories, the culture that I have, the language that I use, and my social standing. That space is going to be different for every single person. If you imagine something like an imposing set of stone stairs leading up to a public building, they might look one way to somebody who's young and athletic, and completely different to somebody who's old or somebody in stiletto heels who wants to walk down those very sharp stone edges, or somebody who experiences chronic pain. Somebody using a walking frame or a wheelchair would have a very different view of a piece of public architecture that they can't use at all. And I'm interested in how you could take those different meanings that different people experience and put them into words, maybe, or to create images or gestures or sketches or some other way of communicating to explain to designers how we feel about our experiences of being in their space. And a lot of spaces, I feel like they're not designed for me and I don't belong there. This is an example of one of my images. Cork City is built on a salt marsh. So this water in the river that's running diagonally from the bottom left to the top right of the image, it's salt water, it smells of seaweed, the sky is full of seabirds, and there are um, limestone edges on both sides of the river, old limestone edges. At one time, ships came in and delivered fresh vegetables and coal and other commodities right into the heart of the city. And now we've got bridges which are getting lower and lower and excluding the ships. So the ships have moved out further. And there are two river channels with an island in the middle. And the main shopping centre is in this island. So it gives us a very strong focus for the Cork city centre. And I live just outside that island on the other side of this river channel. And this is an example of what it looks like to me to be in a place that I'm not looking at reality as it is. I'm not looking at the objective geometry and geography of a place. It's my subjective experience. And if we take something like Andy Clark, the philosopher in Surfing Uncertainty, or his more recent book, The Experience Machine, we don't see reality. We walk through a mental map of the world. And it's only when our mental map fails and the senses tell us that the thing we think is there is different, that our touches are not the same as the mental map we've created. The sounds tell us that something's changed. Then we start attending. And he claims in his book that there are 4 times as many data packets running from the brain to the sensory organs as running the other way, that the brain is telling the sensory organs what to look at, what to feel, what to hear. So we've got a very inverted idea of what the mind is doing to the space outside, that most of this is internal and we're not seeing the outside world. But what we see is this residue of all the things that I attended to, all the things that caught my attention. So I'm here with this is actually with a mobile phone, and I just moved the mobile phone in the way that I would move my eyes, or what I imagine I would move my eyes, and I capture all of these birds and the traffic and the camera motion because I can't hold the camera steady to make a steady long video shot. In Olga Bogdashna's book, Autism and the Edges of the Known World, she uses the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is that we use language and our language determines what we see. And I can give you an example of this. I'm married to a Greek woman, and in Greek, there's a word for pale blues, which is galazia. the color of the sky. And there's a word for blue, which is bleu, what we would call dark blue. And she sees those as being two different categories. Nothing that's Galassio can be bleu, and nothing that's bleu can be Galassio. So we're shopping and we look at an item of clothing and she says, that's this color. And I disagree. I don't have her comprehension. I haven't grown up with it. And we know that this is cultural because this um, interpretation of color of the Galassio bleu, the light dark blue, extends through Russian speakers and Japanese speakers as well. But we have children here in Ireland who didn't grow up in a Greek culture who don't see that distinction. So if you've seen the wonderful film My Octopus Teacher, Craig Foster describes how he developed a relationship with a specific octopus, diving day after day after day and meeting this octopus under the sea and growing a relationship with it that actually changed his idea of what relationship meant. And when he came back to the dry land, it changed his relationship with people, having this expanded consciousness of what relationship means, because somehow he's had this cultural exchange with a different species that many of us don't have. I suppose any of us, really. And in Olga Bogdashina's book, she quotes Donna Williams saying, cultural exchange involves the sharing or swapping of different forms of language and ways of interpretation, all of which have arisen from essentially the same sensory, perceptual, and cognitive mechanisms. But as hard as you might try, it's much easier for a human being with interpretation, i.e., a non-autistic human being, to have a cultural exchange with an octopus with interpretation than it would be for a person with interpretation to comprehend somebody who functions without interpretation, primarily on the level of sensing, i.e., autistic. So she's thinking more of autistic people who don't engage in language, who don't speak out loud, who don't share the words that we have. They probably share many of the same culture, but not through language. And we can't communicate with people who aren't sharing the tokens that we use to describe things. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is like another form of this constructive reality that Andy Clark talks about. And if we don't share culture, we can't share ideas with the people who create and control public space, and especially autistic people and other kinds of groups who don't hold power, don't have the opportunity to be involved in consultations and design processes. We did a survey here in Cork with the support group that I belong to, which we called Sensory City Cork. And we had some nominations of things that we feel about the environment: anxiety or doubt, noise or sound, lightness, brightness or flicker, having too much social contact, the smells or odor, poor signs and getting lost, unpleasant surfaces and textures, and uneven or broken flooring. And we developed those in focus groups. And then after the survey, people added comfortable temperature, judgment or attitudes of other people, the unwritten rules of space, and being able to bring a companion. And it made me think a lot about the images I make of what does the world look like when you judge it through those characteristics for somebody who's autistic and somebody who's not autistic. And what are my images telling people? So this is just me walking around Cork City. I've got my cycle helmet on. There's a camera on it. The camera's actually not running at this moment, but I'm walking around. Not a single person turns and looks at the camera. So whatever I'm capturing is naturalistic. And the camera also isn't secret. So I'm not doing something subversive or secretive. And I'm in a public place, so people don't have an expectation of privacy, which makes it much easier to display this video because I filmed it in the street. It's fine to share it, mostly fine to share it, as long as I stay away from sensitive places. And that camera is a sports camera, an action camera. The camera collects a whole range of amazing data. And I've been using it to make these images of place, thinking if I filmed a place in the way I look at it, I end up with an image which is something like my experience. But what makes that image an autistic image? What would somebody else gather in that same place? So the camera's collecting the noise level and the change in noise, the light intensity and flicker or change in light, the scene complexity. It detects faces for the purpose of being able to edit video with faces in it. But for me, it's collecting social intensity. How many people am I seeing the faces of? If I walk behind them, I see no faces. If I walk towards them, I see social intensity. The gyroscope is measuring my head rotation, which is pitch up and down, the yaw from left to right, and the roll, where I'm turning my head to my left and right shoulder. And the accelerometer measures my acceleration forwards and backwards, up and down, left and right, which can be used on, say, a sports app to measure your ride or measure your workout or measure whatever you're doing with the camera. And in my software, I automatically level and center the action on the forward motion of the walker. So here's an example of what I've done with the video. You can see my head rolling. The image twists around the center point. You can see a green square, which is the center of my gaze. My head is turning towards that point, away from the direction that I'm walking in. So presumably I'm attracted to something over there in that dark corner. I look at the door on the left. I look at the little windows on the right. I look at the people walking in front of me, and I'm seeing all of these things happening. And at the same time, I put some icons at the bottom, the blue sound level, so I can measure how loud it is in this place. I can measure how often the loudness rises or drops. I'm measuring the brightness of the image. So the image has been automatically turned into an acceptable level of brightness to be a video, but the camera's also storing the exposure value of the objective level of brightness. Is it like moonlight or is it like bright sunlight? There's a blue moving line which replicates the green cross in the middle. So it's showing how much my head has deviated to the left and the right. And I imagine when I turn my head away from that center point, it's because something attracted my attention. I have a focus here, which is to walk around this route and maybe to buy something. Maybe it's to get fed. Maybe it's to reach a place of education. And things are dragging my attention away from that task. I get worried about, say, all the people coming from the other route. I'm going to cross a little side road in a minute, and lots of people are going to come out of that, maybe. And on there's a red square in the bottom towards the right. That red square is showing you the complexity of the image. So it's a very simple mathematical equation to calculate how much difference there is in the pixels. And if you have a completely black screen or a completely white screen, that complexity is zero. When there's a lot of detail in the scene, the complexity is high. There were some faces coming up there, so the camera is automatically recognizing the presence of faces and counting them and showing in the right-hand corner a count of how many faces are detected. You can see we're walking past people and not detecting their faces. So you could go through this and manually capture those later. And I've taken here my walk and from the accelerometer made a shape of which direction I moved in. And there's a gateway in the roughly the middle of that walk. So it's a line that goes all the way around, a jaggly line, because I'm not walking smoothly. I take steps, and each of those steps is going to be shown as a little jiggle in the line. I look up and down. I'm checking for safety and making sure I don't trip over the sandwich boards or bump into other people. And every one of those is a little deviation. And where I've got the maximum deviation, I've snapshotted one frame. So I'm assuming where I've gone away from that forward motion towards something that's outside forward, that's something that dragged my attention away, a fascinator, something that said, look at me. And it might be a dark corner, it might be a gateway, it might be lots of people where I want to cross the road. It might be a moving vehicle. It might be graffiti. I show a great love of graffiti in the bottom right. And I do that all the time. I love graffiti. And then this is an image on the left-hand side of the autistic walker, which is me, and my control person who's not autistic. So we're just doing a feasibility study here, which we hope to develop into collecting more video from different places and different people. And the autistic walker, I'm looking down at the ground. I look down, I look to the left and the right, I look a long way out from the center point. The non-autistic walker is focused on the center. The non-autistic walker is not being distracted by all these fascinators, and they're not distributed as much. There are a few things that this person looks at. There's one in the bottom right of the graph, and there's one in the far right and the far left, so they're presumably looking right and left to check safety as they turn corners across the road. Whereas I'm looking up, down, and everywhere. And there's similar work to this done by Robert Cheney in Brigham Young and colleagues, where they took photographs of campus, mostly at night, as the light falls, and they showed them to male and female students. So the female students looked at these places and they're asked to imagine if you're walking alone, perhaps going back to your apartment, and you have to walk up these stairs or down that alleyway, and they're wearing eye-tracking glasses, it tracks what they look at. They have a task, which is to climb the stairs or to walk down the alley, and the task is forwards, and their eyes are being taken to the sides, probably to potential threat, the dark corners. The male response is on the right-hand side. Their focus stays on the center. Their task is to walk up the stairs, they're looking up the stairs. Their task is to walk down the corridor, and they're walking down the corridor. And occasionally they look to the side. But mostly the men don't seem to be concerned in the same way and to have their attention dragged away from their task. On our walking tours, we've got a set of data collected by the camera. So the bottom of these paired matrices, on the left is the autistic walker with your roll and pitch, the rotation of the head. And at the top of the matrix is the sensory inputs, the number of faces, the audio level, and the exposure value of how bright it is. And the diagonal down the center says exposure value is correlated with exposure value, but the rest of them are largely not too correlated. Your role and pitch are not correlated with each other. My behaviors are somewhat uncoordinated. And I don't have a strong correlation with the environment. So my movements interact a bit with the audio, but they don't interact with the faces, for instance. And I think that's quite interesting. Looking at the right-hand side, where the non-autistic person has many more interactions between their yaw, roll, and pitch, that their body motion is much more coordinated, and a much higher correlation between the body behaviors and the environmental measures. So they're reacting to their environment in a way that shows the environment affects their behavior, whereas I'm not. And we have a group that I belong to here called Red Ink, a group of neurodivergent artists. And we were thinking about making sensory-friendly networks of how we move around the city in ways that we feel comfortable. And 5 of the topics that we thought about were creating gradients of sensory choice. Quite often there's an autistic room, like a sensory room or a quiet room, and it's like some kind of segregation, separating autistic people from non-autistic people in a waiting room. But it would be nice to have gradients where you have a quiet side of the room and a noisy side of the room, and people can migrate to the level that they're comfortable with. And airports do this in their design of public space. And if we could have a prospect refuge access, so instead of having a safe place in somewhere like a museum, you have a safe viewpoint. So if people all want to rush up to the Mona Lisa in the Louvre and all get into that crush of trying to take the selfies in front of this one little tiny picture, there might be a safe prospect refuge access at the side where people who are less comfortable with that crush could go and see it and maybe not get as close, but they could see the exhibit in a way that's comfortable. And being socially engaged, the communication with other people, and managing social intensity. So, for instance, creating space around corners so that when you walk around a corner, it's not too congested, creating spaces for people to sit, to spread people out. And Magda Mostafa talks about escapescape, that we don't just create an autism-friendly space, we create networks that connect the autism-friendly spaces to each other and say to the library and to healthcare and to accommodation. So we have connection and transport and low arousal networks. And from our own work, this is actually my own. So we all have different low arousal networks. My home is somewhere on that blue line, and the far side of that blue line is the north side of the river. And I walk along the north side of the river outside the central island that makes up Cork City. And then I've got these 3 different routes entering in. And on those routes, I've made some map pins there for a park, to the cinema, a cafe, to a bookshop, the bank, the ATM, to a theatre, my personal healthcare, a place I shop, and the bus and train station. So I've looked for ways, how do I get from my home to those places without going right through the most congested, most noisy, most busy bits of the city? So I have my escapescape, and that escapescape would be different for other people. But there could be useful ways that you could find commonality between people of how do you create a festival program where autistic people can be a part of the festival. And people have said to me, but autistic people don't go to the festival. Well, of course they don't, because it's not easy to get to when you have sensory overload and potentially embarrassing meltdown. And when I look at these spaces, I think about where should I place myself? And I've got to place myself in space to be comfortable, to be safe, and to have access to the things I need. In time, say being straight after opening time when places aren't busy, and not right at the end of the day when everybody's crushing to get to the shops before they shut, for a lower arousal and easier movement. I need to be placed in my story or my journey. So I have my intended actions, my focus, and I don't want to have sensory or anxiety overload that distracts me from my story. I need things along the way, wayfinding and imagery that reminds me of my story and keeps me on task. And all of that maximizes my opportunity for education, employment, healthcare, leisure, and social participation. And I have an example here from Dublin City University, and this is the main entrance. There's a kind of triangular plaza here with the words DCU in a concrete sign in the center. And everybody's walking towards that sign. That's the main entrance to a pedestrian plaza. And people are coming from the right and from the left on foot, because this is a vehicle-free area. And it's like they're carving down the surface, and everybody who follows them has to follow the trough that they've already carved. And we can turn that carved area into something like a heat map, where we see fast-moving things as being red and things that don't move as blue. So this heat map develops of what this space looks like when we draw the desire lines onto it. And the desire lines aren't straight, they're curved. Some people go a long way around to get through to the place that they're comfortable in without maybe meeting people coming the other way or crossing uncomfortably across a difficult flow. And this is a composite I've made of all the activity here, which was part of the exhibition Picturing Inclusivity. And we have a wonderful poem from Julia Antoninka, who's autistic herself, of looking at this image and saying, "Do birds worry?" That's her title. And I don't think you can see it very clearly, but right in the center of this picture, there's a bird in one of those triangles that it's been captured flying low to the ground, probably when those people weren't standing there, because this is filmed over, say, 20 minutes. And during that 20 minutes, at some point in time, that bird flew close to the ground. And it was probably a moment when there weren't people there. And then the birds in the sky who have a completely different view of this space. And there's a group of people on the left-hand side who are walking through a narrow red brick alleyway. And that alleyway takes you away from the main pedestrian mall. There's a big pedestrian mall running through the center of DCU. And these people walking through the brick alleyway are going to the back entrances of each of the faculty buildings, because that's the quiet way to get in. So they already know where they're going. They know how to get to their office or their lecture theatre, and they're not maybe comfortable walking through the big, busy pedestrian mall. And I'll finish up with a couple of quick things. I've got Lulu, who's singing Boom Bang Bang in the Eurovision Song Contest. You're probably familiar with In the City. Sorry, I've forgotten the title of her most famous song. And I've taken this video and detected the faces in it and detected the things that move in it and highlighted the faces in pink and the motion in cyan. So we'll see the video from the Eurovision Song Contest where she sings, and I put boxes around things that move in blue and faces in pink. And some of us are drawn to these fascinators, the things that move, things that have a lot of color and brightness, things that flicker. And some of us are drawn to faces. And there's a balance that keeps changing between face attention and motion attention. And if we had a task and we're just seeing this movement, that movement is taking us away from the task. If the task was talking to that person, she's singing, but we're, say, watching her singing, the motion distracts from it. And some people seem to be absolutely comfortable with distraction, and other people can't moderate, like me. So I've been told I have attention deficit, but I actually have moderation deficit. My attention's fine. If my task was to look here at just the face and nothing else, I wouldn't be able to do that in the way other people do it. So if I go out and I want to shop for something, I find that maybe the shop has rearranged, or there's somebody with a jackhammer repairing the footpath, or somebody talks to me. I have a script of how I'm going to buy something, and the shopkeeper says something off the script, and I lose track of my plan. My plan's broken, and I have to go home empty-handed. And that happens about 1/3 of all the times that I go out. That the city somehow takes me away from task, takes me away from focus, and takes me onto these fascinators, which are not always helpful. Sometimes they're birds in the sky, and I have a beautiful image to remember it by, but sometimes it's something that's noisy. So if I move on from this. And the last one, this is the TV series Adolescence, which was shown on Netflix, was a worldwide phenomenon. It's won a lot of awards. And I don't know if you know that Adolescence was filmed in a single take. So this 15-year-old actor had to act out the entire episode from beginning to end, unbroken, without any cuts, without any editing. And they took the best of 3 takes of filming the whole of the first episode. So this one camera is following all the motion. And we start off with a suspected sexual assault. The police break into his home. They throw him in the back of a car and they drive him away, which is that motion from left to right. And then they start talking to him, which is a zigzag from one speaker to the other speaker, left to right. And then he's taken off to an evidence room. His clothes are taken away. He's dressed in a what looks like hazmat clothing. And then he's taken to meet his father, his responsible adult. And then they're shown evidence of a video. And there's again a back and forth as they talk about what's in this CCTV video. And we have this image, this is my last slide, which is like a journey through that episode of the camera's movement. And I've collected this with a mathematical algorithm called optical flow, where you compare successive frames and see which direction the camera must have moved in to create the motion, the change in image that you see in the frames. And I had a major revelation when I started making these images of walking into a public building, getting into a lift, and turning around in that lift on the spot 180 degrees to walk out. So you walk in the door, turn around, you walk out the door. But somehow the mind doesn't remember that 180-degree turning on the spot. And when you carry on walking out of the lift, my mind was telling me I'm walking towards the back of the building. And when I reach a window and look out, there's the street at the front. And I always found that confusing until I started making these optical flow images, which are much more like the journey. It's not faithful to the geometry or the geography of the place, but it is faithful to my recollection. And hopefully we can create images that capture those experiences and share them with people who build and control public spaces. Thanks very much. Click again to exit, and I need to stop sharing.
Thank you, Stuart. I would wager we have people who would like to talk about it. Let me just check. We will go to Q&A. 1 second. We may have, the copy will be available. Somebody is asking, will there be a copy of the presentation? Yes, indeed. Within 2 weeks, we just have to edit the open captions, but it will definitely be available. You've already been answered by one of my team. And I really want to welcome Q&A. As usual, we have our man in Tokyo, Dr. Hosono. He visited Cork once and found it a nice and quiet city. You find it quiet sometimes and not so quiet others. He is curious about, as he is usually, about the use of toilets for a person with autism. So let's stick to the public realm, since that's where you've taken us. What about the public realm and toilets and your experience as a person who is autistic? Any thoughts on that?
I find toilets difficult. I remember toilets in school as being the place where bad things happen. The bullying, the getting soaked by other people's pranks. Obviously now, as an adult, the hand dryers, they can get the new ones, the air blade, is such a piercing noise. And it's completely unexpected if you haven't seen the other people finish washing their hands, and suddenly there's this deafening air blade noise. I can cope with noise as long as I expect it, and it's that unpredictability that's hard.
I just an aside for our own community here, we have a shared toilet on our floor, and it has the air dryers that are extremely loud. And as an accommodation to our staff, we got a nice little woven basket and put paper towels in it in order to avoid the hand dryers. And I'm looking, we've got more people coming in on chat than on Q&A. Let me just see. Very nice note from Nancy Lonnet. She's a landscape architect and found this extremely valuable. And I think Stuart's comments about doing this out of doors in public space is something that is worthy of note. Is how he does this without having to worry about getting permission to do this. And I think one of the things that we're very interested in is how to replicate this documentation of experience in places that welcome people to experience what they have to offer. So I think part of what we would like to create are more opportunities for Stuart to be able to do this kind of sensory documentation in places that really want to know what's working and what's not. I think you've had a partial opportunity at the British Museum at Yale. I think we'd love to see the museum environment more fully explored and really think about this. Certainly, the sensory experience in museums is getting a great deal of attention. I know in the UK, it's getting a great deal of attention here in the US, and people are really eager to figure out how to make it work. One of the interesting new issues that we are dealing with is that institutions are recognizing that many of their staff are neurodivergent, some of them autistic, and trying to create an environment in which the staff are not tormented by the environment, and to make that part of what people presume to be part of their job in really looking at how to create welcoming spaces. Have you had a chance to do any museums in Ireland?
Yes, the Crawford Art Gallery in Cork,
Mm-hmm.
who were very helpful and accommodating, and they gave me 2 days
2 days. Okay.
to walk around the
Yeah.
gallery and to film on foot and to install cameras and film how people interacted with the exhibits. But they wanted obviously some control to be sure that nothing that identified people
Right.
ended up
Of
in the
course.
final image.
Yes. And I think that would be expected.
It's very easy to detect motion and face and to blur them.
To just blur them. Yes.
You take away the identity, and it also takes away the logos if somebody's walking with a logo on a shirt, so that doesn't appear in the image either.
An interesting question from Robin Greenberg, which is, can you share more of what you look for in your escape space when attending an assembly? I mean, I think your comments on the quiet space, the respite space, I think all of that deserves to be unpacked a little more fully, because many of us are grappling with expectations that these places are rigidly defined in particular ways. And I think what you talked about is really marrying it more to prospect and refuge and a place where you feel safe. Can you, and to pay attention to Robin's question, what do you look for in the escape space when attending an assembly in particular?
I like to have a physical barrier. I think that's just a kind of hypervigilance thing. I like a wall at my back to know that nothing's going to come from behind me. So a park with railings around it, some kind of enclosure, fence, railings, wall.
Yeah. But you
I'd
can see
like
who's coming at you.
a bench that has a back. Also, that gives you shelter from the weather. If I get on a bus, this is something that other people have found kind of shocking. People who design autism-friendly spaces. I said, if I get on a bus and I'm sitting against the window and the other seat is beside me and the aisle is with the other seat, I know I'm safe in that place. I can go through the most dangerous bits of the city on the bus. I'm fine in there. I know nothing's going to happen to me as long as I'm on the bus. I get on the tram in Dublin that people say, oh, the tram is a very dangerous place. I've sat there with drug dealers and presumably people who do other bad things, but I've seen things happening very openly, and I feel fine if I'm up against the window in my safe place, watching the scenery go by. So I think that enclosure is helpful, and being able to predict noise, that unexpected noise shouldn't arrive, and not being stepped on, that you have to get your feet out of the crowd.
Not being stepped on. That's a good reminder. So our friend Erin Friedlander has said, she's like, got a question. Have you presented these results to any local governments to think about policy change? And have you any thoughts on ways to motivate change at any level using your data? I mean, just looking at the college data that you shared that another scientist is doing about the difference in men and women's perspective and what they are looking at in traversing an ordinary place at night was absolutely fascinating. And we will take that and share it with some of our higher ed clients because I think people need to know. But have you had the opportunity to share, perhaps in
No,
Cork City?
this is too new. It's just this is the first time I presented it.
Oh, do you have intent to share it with
Yes,
the city?
yes. So
Okay.
we've shared the Sensory City report, which was
Okay.
the focus group, and then the characteristics of place and the report
Yeah.
about people generally feel that they have not been accommodated in public space. They don't feel they're accommodated in education or in shops or in anywhere except the library and the park, really. But surprisingly, some people they love noise and bustle, and some people think cafes and restaurants are great places to be, and other people hate them because some people are sensory seeking and some people are sensory avoidant. So we're all very different in the ways we see
And we need to
place.
anticipate that. Yes. Erin is also asking um, she's just interested in expanded conversations about how to make the impact of what you're doing something that other people are taking and running with, are using in a practical way. Is that part of what you hope to do, given that most of this
Oh,
is new?
yes. I mean, we've got these devices now, which is like watching Star Trek with the tricorder, that you have a phone collecting GPS and acceleration and gyroscopic data. It's collecting all this data, and only Google is using it. We're not using it for our own lives, but we could.
We could. It's free.
But we could walk around a bit of a city and video it, and in that video is embedded all of this magical data, and then do something with it and send it to the city and say, look, there's a huge problem here trying to navigate the potholes. These bits of pavement are all broken and caved in by builders' vehicles. So it'd be interesting to see
The,
because you'd see it in the
the,
acceleration data.
the potential is enormous.
Mm.
Another question. Do you think the experience varies much from one individual to the next individual who is autistic? This is from our colleague and friend Kay Bell.
Yes, definitely. The buses, I actually hadn't appreciated this until we did the survey. And it was one
Mhm.
of the respondents who said when they want to concentrate on their coursework, they get on the bus to Kinsale, which is an hour and a half, and they go to Kinsale and they come back, and they have a disability pass, so the trip is free. Wearing noise-cancelling headphones, they're first in the queue to sit at the back, and they take out their laptop, and they've got 3 hours on the bus, and it's their safe place. It's their magical me time. And it made me realize the bus and the tram are great places to sit and just watch the city. So I've done this in London and in Prague and in New York, just sitting on a bus for the sake of being outdoors, of seeing the outdoor view, which you don't see in the metro, and you don't necessarily see it in a taxi. You only see it walking or on the bus where you're raised up above the other traffic. But
Love it.
definitely different people, their senses are so different from one another. Different autistic people are as different from each other as autistic people are from non-autistic people.
Thank you. And I know, I think a lot of people are affirming that that is indeed true. Ben Schultz, who is a theater designer, and this is so enlightening, he says. Thank you for sharing your experience. Could you please elaborate a bit more on the idea of gradient experience within a shared space? And I'm very grateful, Ben. Thank you for asking that question. You use the example of ranging from loud to quite quiet areas. Are there other considerations we should be mindful of? It's not just audible.
The ones that I've seen that work really well are in big airports, where the
Ah,
center line is normally a curve, which encourages people to be more mindful of each other than a straight line. If there's a straight line, people race and they're not mindful of each other. If there's a curve, it just tells them to be mindful. And that center line is hard linoleum. So you can push your trolley or drag your wheeled suitcase at speed. And then beside it, there's soft linoleum. And then there's a next layer of thin carpet, and then an outer layer of thick carpet. And the people waiting for their flights are on seats on the thick carpet. The cafes are there, the shops, the duty free are all there on the thick carpet. So if you're rushing along with your suitcase on wheels or your trolley and you try to go onto the carpet, it's like putting the brakes on because the wheels sink into the soft pile and it slows everything down. The carpet quietens the space and it tells you this is the quiet space. Get back on that linoleum. You can race there. And I think that works really well. So speed is important. Different people walk at different speeds and they need to find some separation of speed. The gradients of noise, gradients of light levels, having a darker corner and a bright corner. And we go into places like Starbucks, an international chain, and the whole restaurant is the same. There's no seat where you can be out of the noise, out of the bustle. And at McDonald's or any of these chains, every seat is the same as any other seat. They haven't attempted to create a quiet corner
Stuart,
and a noisy corner.
have you had the opportunity to consider this specifically in theaters?
No, no.
No. Okay. We'll have to put that on your
But
radar.
in theatres of, yes, maybe the access to seating that you could have a quiet aisle, an aisle where people who pre-register as having a quiet need come down that aisle. I've certainly thought in terms of lecture theatres that we have ridiculous things like two wheelchair replaceable seats, and they're usually in two corners. So if they go as a couple in two wheelchairs, they can't sit together. And it's only two people in the screening or in the
Yes, you
lecture.
should.
In the health sciences building here in Cork, there's an entrance from the basement into the ground level of the lecture theatre, steeply canted lecture theatre. And it's like people who use wheelchairs have to go and be subjected to the gaze of the entire auditorium to reach these two magic seats at the front. And I don't know why it's arranged like that. Why aren't all the seats replaceable? Why isn't there more space that you can be? And if they dare to come in from the high level, from the first floor at the top of this canted auditorium, where it's most comfortable and it's quietest, and the escape is easy through the door back into the hallway, the security guard comes and says, "You can't sit here, it's a fire risk." So that kind of thing will also happen in theatres of the seating being um, not.
Um, this is a friend and client of ours, Rabia. Shanishan. I have to jump off for a meeting, but thank you so much. Just a note of thanks. But Stuart, one of the things that I'd like you to do is to share some of your resources. So you've talked about a film that you, Picturing Inclusivity, the John Schaffer film. Is this readily available?
I have a link. Can I drop that in the chat?
Please do. I also would ask you, drop that in, and then I would like you to drop in your own personal website, which is a treasure trove of your work, your ruminations, extremely valuable. So if you could give that to everyone also. And we have Kathy Dalton in Cork wants to meet. So we'll, Professor of Architecture.
So Kathy Dalton, right?
Yes. Okay, marvelous. Thank you so much. And we will hope to see you in Galway in November of this year.
Yes, this should be so exciting.
Yes, very much looking forward to it. Promises to be a wonderful event. For those that don't know, Universal Design 26 is going to be in Galway, Ireland, and promises to be an extravaganza of some very good thinking from people across the world. And we're certainly hoping that we will see Stuart there. So, Stuart, we thank you. This has been enormously interesting. It catalyzes more ideas than I can quite keep reined in of ways in which these insights would have pertinence to design solutions. So stay well, my friend. I think there's a lot of work to be done.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.